So the Plymouth Duster was a mid-sized car made from 1970 through 1976. It started out strong with a 340 cubic inch V8 producing 275 horsepower, but just like all cars of the 70s, it slowly dropped in power until it finally settled at 145. But even still, if you're considering to buy a classic American muscle car and have a thing for Mopars, I highly suggest a Duster. Here's why. In the early 1970s, a lot of the big American car manufacturers were moving away from the classic Coke bottle design of the 60s in order to modernize their lineup for the new decade. Chrysler, Dodge, Plymouth, being late to trends as usual, didn't update their styling, and as a result was a lineup that looked really 60s despite being made in the 70s. Which might have been a bad business decision at the time, but fast forward to today, where the 60s cars are highly desirable and people skip over the cars of the 70s, that makes the Duster kind of exist in limbo, and therefore makes it a perfect time for you to buy one for yourself. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're going to be continuing our series of the cheapest muscle cars from the 60s and 70s with a popular one, the Plymouth Duster. I've always liked them. I think the styling's very close to like an old Challenger or Barracuda, but unlike those cars, the price hasn't skyrocketed on these yet. We're going to be going into all that in this video, so let's continue. Cherry match that like button and subscribe. Thank you. Now, as soon as I discovered all this, the first thing I did was hop on Facebook Marketplace to see how much these were going for. And after searching through hundreds of listings all across the United States of America, I selected 6 cars that I think represent the market really well. First off is the cheapest that still runs and drives. Why is it so cheap, you ask? Well, this one has the Slant 6 engine in it. So if you want a V8, you're gonna have to dish out a little more money. Like for this one, that's about the same condition as that other one. It does still run and drive, but the bigger engine comes with a price markup. Now, what if you have a little bit more money to spend and don't necessarily want a project car? Well, then you might be interested in something like this. This is an all-original, low-miles Duster that does have the Slant 6 engine, but even still, you're getting an extremely nice car for not that much money. And here's the price of a Duster in the same condition, but has a V8. Now, if you're just rolling in money and you want something even nicer than one of those, then you might be interested in the Duster 340. This was the cheapest one I could find. I usually like to show the cheapest one that still runs and drives, but this one's in really nice shape, just doesn't have an engine or transmission. Then we got the price of the all-original 340 that seems to be about the average price for one in this condition. Now, most people will say that while cheap muscle cars do exist, new parts for them are more expensive than that of a mainstream muscle car, and that by the time you're done with your project, the price will all even out in the end. But that doesn't seem to be the case with the Duster. To show you what I mean, I selected random replacement parts for the Duster and then compared them to the price for the same part for another classic car. And for my first example, I'm using the quarter panel for a Duster, GTO, and Mustang. So while they're not all exactly the same price, this should prove that there's not a huge price markup, at least for body panels. Body panels are one thing, but what about interior parts? Do those parts compare as well? Using molded carpet for my example and comparing them to the same cars as earlier, I found that that was the case. As a matter of fact, most of the parts I saw for the Duster were all pretty close to the parts for other classic cars. And while I wouldn't call these parts extremely cheap, at least you know you wouldn't be paying less had you bought a different car. Okay, so now it's time to address the elephant in the room. Because despite the Duster's styling, it's still a car from the 70s, and you know what that means. While the original Duster 340 from the early 1970s did have a respectable 275 horsepower, the Dusters after that didn't really pack a punch. So if you want to make a Duster actually have some muscle car power, your only option is by modifying it. And luckily, the Plymouth has several routes you can take no matter what your budget is. Option 1 is the bolt-on route. These are mods that can be done by a beginner, stuff like intakes, exhaust, and carbon fuel delivery upgrades. This is also fairly budget friendly, however, it's only going to do so much when it comes to horsepower gains. So if you want even more power, you're going to have to move on to the next option, building your engine. If you have the original 340, 318, or 360 V8 still in it, small upgrades like a cam or piston are fairly affordable, so a mildly built engine wouldn't be too expensive. But if you want to start changing heads or putting a stroker kit in it, the price can jump up rather quickly. and it might be wiser to just move on to the next option instead of doing all that. The last option being an engine swap, which if your Duster has a slant 6 in it, this should be your first step to trying to make power. And when it comes to engine swaps, the Duster is really flexible with your options, being able to fit any Mopar V8s, including the big block 440. And while I don't recommend it, an LS swap is possible. I know it's a Chevy engine and a Plymouth. I'm really against it personally, but it's been done. And there you have it. Whether you're looking for a car to do a full restoration on or just a fun entry-level project car, the Plymouth Duster might just be the car for you. I hope this video was helpful for some of you. If it was, be sure to hit all those buttons below, and I'll see you next time.